Have you ever stopped to think how the constant pressure to buy and sell might be influencing not just what you own, but how you see the world, even how you experience beauty? It's a real rabbit hole when you start to consider it.
It is. And the core insight here is that the structures of our society profoundly shape our innermost thoughts and perceptions in ways we might not even realize.
Mm.
It goes deep.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. We're plunging into critical theory, which emerged as a response to some of the earlier Marxist ideas when folks started grappling with the full impact of modern capitalism. These thinkers were really focused on how capitalism doesn't just affect our bank accounts, but actually molds the very way we think and experience everything around us.
Exactly. And one area where this becomes particularly fascinating is in their perspective on aesthetics, the philosophy of art and beauty. We've got a listener who flagged the entry on aesthetics and critical theory from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and that's our starting point for thinking like philosophers today.
So, our mission, which we're definitely accepting, is to unpack why critical theory, even with its strong focus on social and economic issues, even has an aesthetics. What key insights do these thinkers offer about art and our aesthetic experiences within a capitalist society? We'll be exploring ideas from some major thinkers like Marx, Lukács, Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse, and Bloch.
Quite a lineup.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why would a group of thinkers so concerned with social injustice also spend so much time thinking about art? It seems a little surprising on the surface.
Well, what's fascinating here is that for critical theory, the focus on art and aesthetics isn't a side project. It's a crucial element in understanding and potentially overcoming social injustice. They see art and our aesthetic experiences as deeply intertwined with the very problems they're trying to address.
How so? Help us think like philosophers here. How does art connect to, like, economic structures?
Well, to begin thinking this way, we need to go back to Marx and his idea of commodity fetishism. Marx argued that under capitalism, the social character of the labor that goes into producing goods gets obscured.
Obscured.
Instead of seeing a commodity as the product of human labor and social relations, we see it as having an objective value in itself, just because it's a thing being bought and sold. So the core insight here is that capitalism creates a kind of illusion, hiding the human labor behind things. This seemingly simple idea has huge implications for how we even perceive beauty and value, which critical theory unpacks through aesthetics.
Right, like that fancy artisanal sourdough bread you see at the market. We see the price tag, the beautiful crust, maybe even hear about the heritage grains, but we don't really think about the farmer who grew the wheat, the miller who ground it, the baker who toiled for hours.
Exactly, all the human effort that went into that loaf.
Yeah.
Precisely. Marx used a great analogy. He compared it to the appearance of air. Even after we scientifically understand that air is made up of different gases, it still appears to us as a simple, unified atmosphere. Similarly, even when we intellectually understand that a commodity's value comes from human labor, the capitalist system still presents it as having an inherent objective worth. But Marx believed that reason could see through this illusion, understand the underlying social relations.
Okay, I get that. So capitalism creates this kind of mist around how we see things. But where does aesthetics fit into this philosophical picture? How does art help cut through the mist?
That's where Lukács comes in. In his influential work, History and Class Consciousness, Lukács took Marx's idea a step further with the concepts of reification. He argued that capitalism doesn't just present a misleading appearance, it actually affects our fundamental way of thinking and perceiving the world.
Okay.
He used the German term Verdienstung, which translates to something like thingification. Think of it as the process where human relations and abstract concepts become treated as if they were concrete things.
Thingification.
Sounds.
Dehumanizing, philosophically speaking. A bit cold.
That's the idea. Lukács argued that under capitalism, all sorts of issues get treated in an increasingly formal and standardized way, becoming more and more removed from their qualitative essence. Think about bureaucratic processes. The way goods are increasingly commodified, everything becomes standardized and geared towards exchange in the market.
So instead of seeing each situation or each person as unique, we start fitting them into these preset abstract categories. It's like our philosophical lens gets narrowed. We lose the specifics.
Exactly. And the problem, according to Lukács, is that these categories are often too restrictive. They don't capture the richness and complexity of the world. Important aspects like the exploitation inherent in capitalist production or the moral implications of our actions get excluded from our reified way of thinking.
So we lose sight of the human element, the social connections, the ethical considerations. Our philosophical understanding becomes impoverished, almost like we're wearing blinders.
Precisely. Now, critical theory built upon Lukács's idea of reification, but they diverged on one key point. Lukács believed that the proletariat, the working class, could be the primary force to counteract reification by recognizing their own exploitation.
Makes sense. They're the ones most directly experiencing the downsides, right? They feel it most acutely.
That's what Lukács thought. But critical theorists like Horkheimer and Adorno weren't so sure. They argued that even the proletariat's experience is shaped by this reified consciousness. The world can superficially appear very different from how it really is to everyone, regardless of their social position.
Okay, so if reification is this all-encompassing thing and there isn't one specific group that can just see through it, where does that leave us, philosophically speaking? How can we even recognize it, let alone challenge it? Seems like a trap.
This is crucial for understanding their philosophical project. For critical theory, if reification is this pervasive problem with the very form of our experience, not just the content or who's having the experience, then the solution must also engage with the form of experience.
The form.
Yes. And that's why they see reification as fundamentally an aesthetic problem in the broadest sense concerning our sensible experience of the world. Therefore, art and aesthetic experience become incredibly important as potential avenues to disrupt this reified consciousness and help us think differently.
Wow. Okay, so art isn't just a pretty distraction. It's potentially a way to break free from these ingrained patterns of thought that capitalism imposes on us, a tool for philosophical liberation. Here's where it gets really interesting. How exactly does art do that? I mean, some art is very explicitly political, but critical theory seems a bit skeptical of that, right?
That's a key point in their philosophical approach to art. Unlike Lukács's later emphasis on socialist realism, where art directly thematized social and political issues.
Like propaganda almost.
Well, or at least very direct messaging. Critical theory, particularly Adorno, Marcuse, and Benjamin, were often wary of overtly political art. They found more potential in art that wasn't so explicitly didactic.
Why the skepticism? If you want to critique society, why not just say it outright in your art? It seems like the most direct philosophical approach, hit them over the head with it.
Their reasoning centers on the primacy of form over content in art. Now, it's important to clarify, they didn't see form and content as separate. They believed they were deeply intertwined, with content being, as they put it, sedimented into form.
Cemented into form, okay.
The idea isn't that the surface-level subject matter becomes formal, but rather that the deeper meaning of the artwork is primarily expressed through its formal properties, its structure, its techniques, the way it's put together. Think of form as the artist's toolkit, the way they arrange colors in a painting, the rhythm and melody in music, the structure of a novel. It's the how the art is made.
Can you give me an example of how that works philosophically, maybe something concrete?
Sure. Think about Kafka's The Trial, a favorite example of Adorno's. On the surface, it's a story about a man caught in this absurd, never-ending legal process for a crime he doesn't know he committed.
Right, Joseph K. Very confusing, unsettling book.
Exactly. But Adorno argued that its deeper meaning, its critique of certain aspects of capitalism, the alienation, the bureaucracy isn't stated explicitly. Instead, it's communicated through the very texture of the novel, the dreamlike logic, the oppressive atmosphere, the inexplicable bureaucracy. The form itself embodies the feeling of alienation and powerlessness that critical theory associates with capitalist society. It forces us, as readers, into a similar feeling of disorientation.
So the way the story is told is more important than the literal events of the story in conveying this deeper critique. It's a philosophical argument embedded in the structure itself. The feeling it gives you is the point.
Exactly. The argument is that reified thought, that abstract and instrumental way of thinking we talked about earlier, can actually absorb explicit moral or political claims in art. It can turn them into just another commodity, another slogan, without really disrupting the underlying mode of thought. A protest song, for example, might be catchy and popular, but does it fundamentally change the way people think about the issues it addresses? Or does it just become background music?
Good point. It could just become part of the background noise, another product in the marketplace of ideas. Easily digestible, maybe too easily?
Precisely. So for critical theory, art has to resist being easily commodified and understood through pre-established categories, those compositional conventions, cliches, and predictable structures. Its critical relationship to capitalism is communicated through its challenging, often unsettling, formal organization, not through simple declarative statements.
It's like the art itself has to be resistant to push back against those easy classifications, forcing us to engage more deeply and philosophically. It needs friction.
Exactly. It compels us to grapple with it in a different way, a way that isn't so easily absorbed by a reified consciousness. Now, one question that critical theory never fully resolved is how exactly this social content gets translated into formal properties. How does, say, alienation become a certain kind of musical dissonance or narrative structure?
Yeah, that seems like the tricky part.
Marcuse suggested that artistic materials themselves, words, colors, tones, carry socially performed meanings that artists work with. They aren't blank slates.
So the artist isn't just pulling things out of thin air, they're working with materials that are already loaded with social and cultural baggage. Their philosophical choices are constrained and informed by history. They're shaping stuff that already means something.
Yes. Adorno, on the other hand, saw a more antagonistic relationship between art and social content. He saw art as defying contemporary norms, demonstrating their revisability, kind of actively fighting against the grain.
Okay.
Marcuse had a slightly more nuanced view, seeing art as not only critiquing and negating society, but also hinting at unrealized potentials for a better future.
So is Adorno saying art primarily attacks the system, whereas Marcuse sees it as also offering glimpses of what could be, like critique versus critique plus hope?
That's a helpful distinction. Yeah. Captures a key tension. This is all making sense. So challenging form is a way of challenging the status quo in our thinking. Now, what about popular culture? Critical theory, particularly Adorno and Horkheimer, famously coined the term culture industry. It didn't sound like they were big fans, philosophically speaking. You're right. They coined the term culture industry in Dialectic of Enlightenment, and it was intended as a really biting piece of irony. The idea was that culture, art, music, film was increasingly being produced and distributed according to the same logic as any other industry, with a focus on standardization and profit.
Right.
The fact that we now casually refer to the music industry or the film industry kind of illustrates their point, even though the irony might be lost on many. The key insight here is that both avenues of culture are compromised. High art becomes exclusive, and popular culture, while accessible, often just reinforces the status quo rather than truly challenging it.
So they saw this as a negative thing. Culture being treated like just another widget factory, churning out standardized products for mass consumption. It seems to undermine the very philosophical potential of art we were just discussing.
Absolutely. They argued that the increasing dominance of exchange and standardization was undermining genuine culture. They weren't just making armchair pronouncements either. They engaged with the mechanics of radio, Hollywood, the record industry, trying to understand how this industrialization of culture was happening, on the ground.
And their aesthetic analysis of popular culture, what did they find so problematic from a philosophical standpoint? Was it just snobbery?
They were often highly critical, judging many popular art forms as lacking genuine merit. Adorno's critiques, in particular, could be quite harsh. This has led to the perception that critical theory simply dismissed all popular culture as inferior, longing for some idealized past of high culture. But it's more nuanced than that.
Okay. How so?
Adorno himself said in a letter that popular and high art were like two torn halves that didn't make a whole.
Torn halves? What did he mean by that philosophically? Like neither is complete on its own.
He meant that the division itself was a symptom of a flawed society. He saw that popular culture often retained elements that high art had lost, like accessibility and immediate pleasure, things people actually enjoy without needing a PhD.
Uh-huh.
He even acknowledged the economic inequalities that underpin the world of high art, the leisure time and money required to appreciate classical music or avant-garde painting, for example.
So he saw some virtues in popular culture. It wasn't all bad in their philosophical assessment. He wasn't just saying, turn off the radio.
Yes. He noted that popular music, for instance, is generally pleasant and easy to access, qualities that ideal art, in his view, should possess. However, he also criticized popular culture for promising things it doesn't deliver genuine novelty, true satisfaction of our impulses.
Oh, okay.
He famously critiqued the syncopation in jazz, arguing that it offered the semblance of spontaneity and rebellion, but ultimately adhered to rigid preset structures. It felt free, but wasn't really.
Like fake nonconformity.
Kind of, yeah. Marcuse echoed this, arguing that even seemingly permissive popular culture often contained transformative potential, but never fully explored it, offering just enough release to maintain the status quo. Think about how often we see the same basic plot lines and character archetypes in blockbuster movies. That standardization is precisely what Adorno and Horkheimer were concerned about.
It's like a tease, promising something more but ultimately falling short. Philosophically, it's a kind of deception, keeping us hooked without delivering real change or insight.
Exactly. Adorno even objected to the radio transmission of Beethoven, not because Beethoven was too good for the masses, but because the technology couldn't truly capture the richness and complexity of a live performance. He felt it gave people a diluted experience while pretending to be the real thing, a reproduction, not the experience itself.
So, the core of their critique wasn't about the popularity or accessibility of culture, but about its failure to genuinely deliver on its promises and its role in reinforcing existing social structures. It's a philosophical argument about authenticity and potential, not just taste.
Precisely. Under capitalism, they argued, neither high nor popular culture is truly good enough for the public. High culture suffers from its dependence on inequality, while popular culture suffers from its inherent limitations and its role in pacifying rather than truly satisfying desires. Both are flawed reflections of a flawed system.
This gives me a whole new way of thinking about the music and movies we consume, a more critical and philosophical lens. Okay, so we've talked about how art is structured, its form, and critical theories' take on popular culture. Let's shift gears to how we actually experience art. How does aesthetic experience work against this reification we've been discussing?
This is where the counter-reifying power of art really comes into focus. It's not just about the artwork itself, but the experience it elicits when we actively engage with its form and content. Critical theory argues that this experience could be socio-historically specific and deeply critical, challenging our conventional ways of thinking and perceiving.
Yeah.
So if reification is this thingification that makes us see the world in rigid categories, thinkers like Bloch are suggesting art can jolt us out of that by showing us possibilities we haven't even considered, right?
So it's not a passive thing. We have to actively participate to bring our own philosophical reflection to the encounter. You can't just let it wash over you.
Absolutely. And here, the ideas of Ernst Bloch become really important. He saw art as uniquely combining an account of the present with possibilities for the future that we often ignore what he called the not yet.
Not yet. I like that.
He emphasized the utopian aspect of art, its ability to depict how things might be, thereby revealing that what seems necessary and fixed in our current reality is actually malleable. Art as a window into potential futures, a way of imagining beyond the now.
Art as a window into potential futures, a way of imagining beyond the now. It's a call for philosophical imagination. It primes us to think differently.
Exactly. And for Bloch, this disruptive experience happens through the interplay between the autonomous processes of art, the artist's creative choices, and the active participation of the person experiencing the art. This combination can point beyond the artwork itself, and by extension, beyond the limitations of the current social order.
So it's a moment of breaking free from those reified categories, even if just for a moment. A glimpse of philosophical possibility, like a crack in the wall.
Precisely. Adorno built on this, but with a slightly different emphasis. He argued that art doesn't directly show us a better world, but rather exposes the contradictions and distortions within our reified consciousness itself. It shows us the problem more clearly.
Okay.
For him, aesthetic experience is a process of disillusionment, forcing us to confront the gap between how we think the world is and how it actually is. The artwork makes the inconsistency undeniable.
A bit less overtly utopian than Bloch, more about revealing the flaws in the present. A more critical philosophical stance. Sharper, maybe.
Yes. While Bloch saw art as hinting at concrete possibilities, Adorno focused on art's ability to make us aware that the demands and tendencies of capitalist society are not absolute. We might not know exactly how to change things, but art can make us realize that change is possible. It shakes our certainty about the status quo. He saw art as engaging with our conceptual structures, pushing them to their breaking point through the manipulation of aesthetic materials. Almost like art forces our brains into a new way of processing information, short-circuiting the usual pathways.
Almost like art forces our brains into a new way of processing information, a philosophical rewiring. It messes with our categories.
That's a good way to put it. Marquise, in his approach, tried to bridge the gap between Adorno's formal sophistication and Bloch's utopianism, also incorporating Freudian psychoanalysis.
Freud comes into it too.
Yes. Building on the idea of breaking free from those reified thought patterns, Marcuse introduces this concept of desublimation. He saw art as having a liberating potential, both by indicting existing forms of thought and by creatively representing the genuine state of things, uncovering potential for liberation.
And that's where his idea of desublimation comes in, right? As a philosophical concept related to liberation. What does that mean exactly?
Exactly. For Marcuse, desublimation, facilitated by art, is the expression of repressed urges and potentialities that we weren't even aware of. Things society tells us to ignore or suppress. By becoming aware of these repressed aspects of ourselves and nature, we experience an emancipation of sensibility, which points toward a more liberated future.
So art isn't just intellectual, it's also tapping into our emotions and desires, helping us imagine a different way of being. It engages the whole person in a philosophical quest for something more. It lets things out.
Yes. For Marcuse, aesthetic experience is both a critical, rational process and a space for the liberation of our drives and emotions, allowing us to both understand the contradictions of the present and unlock the resources for a better future. It's cognitive and effective.
This is powerful stuff. It's not just about appreciating a painting or listening to music. It's about a fundamental challenge to our ingrained ways of seeing and being in the world, a deeply philosophical act. Now, critical theory also had some interesting things to say about natural beauty, which is maybe not something we always associate with this school of thought. Seems more focused on society.
You're right. In the 20th century, many philosophers moved away from discussing the aesthetics of nature, but the Frankfurt School was a notable exception. In fact, their emphasis on the moral and aesthetic significance of nature's beauty anticipates many contemporary ideas in environmental aesthetics.
Really?
They agree that appreciating nature's beauty has moral implications and is connected to resisting our destructive exploitation of it.
So they were early environmental thinkers in a way, bringing their philosophical lens to the natural world, ahead of their time.
In a certain sense, yes. However, they differed from some contemporary environmental aesthetics in their focus. They weren't primarily concerned with nature in itself, untouched by humans, like some pristine wilderness ideal.
Oh.
Instead, they emphasized nature in relation to human capacities, needs, and projects. They rejected the idea of a timeless, ahistorical beauty in nature.
So our understanding of what's beautiful in nature is shaped by our historical context and our relationship with it. It's not an objective truth, but a historically contingent philosophical judgment. What one era finds beautiful, another might not.
Precisely. They argue that both the concept and the experience of nature are historically determined. They were also wary of what they called mere nature as an appropriate object of aesthetic experience.
Mere nature. What did they mean by that philosophically? Nature that's just there.
Adorno famously compared raw, untamed nature like alpine moraines, those rocky debris fields left by glaciers, to industrial debris.
Wow, okay. That's provocative.
His point was that nature, untouched by human cultivation, can appear just as alien and even hostile as the waste products of industry. They believe that proper contemplation of nature should be of nature for us, recognizing our interconnectedness. Mere nature, nature seen as completely separate and opposed to us, doesn't allow for that recognition. It feels foreign.
So the beauty we find in nature isn't just about the natural object itself, but about our relationship to it, our understanding of our place within it. It's a philosophical reflection on our connection to the world. It's about us in nature, not just looking at nature.
Exactly. They saw both humanity and nature as not fully realized under current conditions, and that the beauty we perceive in nature can point towards a more reconciled relationship. They embedded the aesthetic response to nature within a broader project of shifting our relationship from one of domination to one of harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Adorno even found images of this more pacified relationship in historical works, like hillside towns built with local stone, seeing in them a retrospective vision of utopia given our current environmental crisis.
Ah, interesting. Like seeing a potential in the past.
It's like these older ways of interacting with nature, even if they involved exploitation in some sense, now offer a glimpse of a more balanced way of being in the world compared to our current destructive path. A philosophical lesson embedded in history and aesthetics.
It's like these older ways of interacting with nature, even if they involved exploitation in some sense, now offer a glimpse of a more balanced way of being in the world compared to our current destructive path. A philosophical lesson embedded in history and aesthetics.
Precisely. The beauty we see in those remnants speaks to a different kind of human-nature connection, one we've perhaps lost.
This has been a truly deep dive into thinking like philosophers about aesthetics. So to summarize, critical theory sees aesthetics as way more than just the study of art. It's a crucial lens for understanding how capitalism shapes our very perception.
Right, down to the core.
Art especially through its challenging forms, can resist and critique the reified consciousness that capitalism fosters. And when we actively engage with aesthetic experiences, we have the potential to disrupt our conventional understanding and even glimpse alternative possibilities.
Yeah, the utopian element.
Plus, their unique take on natural beauty emphasizes our intertwined relationship with the environment and points towards a future of reconciliation.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive and challenging perspective that really makes you think about the forces shaping our world and our experiences within it. It compels us to engage philosophically with the everyday, looking differently at a movie, a song, even a landscape.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to consider. Considering critical theory's ideas, how might our engagement with art and even the natural world be a subtle form of resistance, or a way of envisioning a different kind of society, even if we're not consciously thinking about economics or politics? It's something to mull over philosophically, isn't it?
It is. And we hope this deep dive has encouraged you to explore further the complex and fascinating relationship between aesthetics, society, and your own individual experience to continue thinking like philosophers long after this discussion ends.